All right, welcome to the Roaming Roots podcast. My co-host is Innocent, and our guest is she'll tell us her story. But I met her because I am one of those that are children of priests, Catholic priests, and we have groups in which we meet, and I've been to those groups, and through those groups, I was able to meet with one Linda Kelly-Lawless, and she's from Australia, but I'll let her tell us exactly where in Australia or where she was born and a little bit about her backstory. So, Linda, take it away.
My mother was born in Melbourne, but she was forced to have me adopted and was sent to Sydney. So that was a common practice back in the time. So I was actually born in Sydney, and I was to be adopted. But at the last minute, we believe my mother basically left the hospital with me, which left me with a birth certificate that didn't make any sense. So I never ever knew who my father was. When I was about 8 years of age, my mother told me that the man who was raising me, the wonderful man that was raising me, was actually not my father. He was my stepfather. So I knew at 8, and it was very shameful. I felt shame. I knew my mother carried the shame as well. But sort of life goes on, and you sort of think about it. And then when I was about 10, it came up again, and my mother told me that I had a half brother and 2 half sisters. She said she never wanted to have me adopted, and that's, she did everything she could to keep me, which I thought was amazing for a woman back in the early 60s. It was just not a done thing to keep the child. And I knew that I had all this family out there, and then she told me that that she loved my father dearly, but they weren't able to stay together. As time went on, it got to the stage where my mother was frightened of me finding out who my father was, and it became such a taboo subject. I actually, for a while, thought that maybe she'd been raped. I couldn't understand the immense trauma she seemed to carry with whatever happened when I was born, not knowing the whole story. And every time I did bring it up, it was just dead silent. People couldn't see the terror that I seen in her eyes. It was really horrible to see, and I've never forgotten it. My mother took the secret with her when she passed away. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm never going to know who my father is. In the past, I had asked my aunties, and they said they didn't know who my father was, and I respect that. But I've been a genealogist since my early 20s, and I love doing family history. I'm a researcher. I lost my mother and my sister in a short period of time, so I'd given up that hobby for a while. I just found it a bit confronting because I was missing so much of my family, my important people in my life. And, my stepdad had passed away. So I got back into research, and there was this wonderful woman in Ireland. She said to me, you should do your DNA for your husband's line. We might be able to. And being a researcher, I thought I was going to be looking for papers and documents and things like that. And I couldn't work out how my ethnicity would solve that mystery of where they came in that townland in Ireland. And because it was a special, I got myself one. I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with me finding out that I could be half Italian, I could be half anything, I don't know. But it wasn't until the DNA test came back that I realised I matched with people. And the shock that had happened was I realised was people are going to contact me and ask me how they're related to me, and I'm not going to be able to tell them. I sat there for a few days just thinking, oh, my God, some of these people are on my father's side. And I reached out to a lady in America, And she said, oh, your husband and my husband related along whatever line. And I just couldn't understand it because there was no documents to go back that far. How did she do it? And she said, oh, I do it with the DNA. So I wrote and said, how much and all that. She said, I do it for a hobby. I enjoy it. Happy to help. And that's how it all started. And because she builds family trees with the DNA, and me being a family tree builder myself, I could see immediately how this all worked. And it was a huge learning curve, but I loved it. And we got to the stage of the DNA that we knew I was a Kelly, but we didn't know which Kelly. And it was nice to know after all these years that I belonged somewhere. I belonged somewhere in this huge family tree. And that led me to then, about 6 months later, mentioning it to my aunt in passing. I said, I'm a Kelly with the DNA. And she started not screaming but yelling. She said, oh, my God, I have to tell you something. And because in my mind, she doesn't know who my father is. It was one of those moments in life that was I'll never forget it, And she said, I have to tell you that his name was Joe Kelly. And I looked at her and I started to flip up the family tree on my phone. And she said, oh, love, she said, he was a Catholic priest. And because I was just gobsmacked. And I flipped down to the phone and I said, oh, my God, this family's got a Catholic priest. And then I went, oh, no, he's too old. Oh, no, love, she said, he was a lot older than your mother. Mm-hmm. And my whole world just changed. I was sitting in a car in the middle of Melbourne absorbing this information that I'd wanted to know in my life. And I not only found out who my father was, but then I had this other stigma thrown on top. And that was, not only was I illegitimate, but I was also the child of a Catholic priest. And I thought that I was probably the only one in the world at that stage. But being a researcher, I went straight to archives and I managed to get my mother's hospital file. And sadly, it was false names. The police station was involved. My mother was well above age. She was 24. I was not discharged from the hospital. I just vanished. Nothing made any sense. It was all in limbo. And my birth certificate that I've always had doesn't have a surname. It never had a surname at all. And people don't even know how. I can't use it this day and age, but how I got away with using it. But that's how it all started. And I just remember thinking, where do I go for help? And I contacted a couple of crisis places, and you could see they were humouring me. Oh, he's a priest. Well, and I'm like, you don't believe me. So I decided that I needed to do something with this, and that's where I sort of decided that I would research and approach the church. I wanted them to know, and I just wanted them to acknowledge me because from what my family were telling me, I was hidden. My father knew. He paid for everything, or him and the church paid for everything. For my mother, she was staying in this beautiful house in Paddington, and in hindsight, I knew that my mother and my family wouldn't have been able to afford that. But things in the past made sense, and that was, one of them was Mum begged me to let this priest that came to the door to send him away. She was terrified. It was not like my mother to be like that. So many things, so many things made total sense. And I know she wanted to desperately tell me, including when we were in Ireland and she took me to where the Kellys come from. I'm oblivious that I'm in my home area in Ireland, and she was alive with me. But she was taking me on this journey she knew of but couldn't tell me. And Dalesford was another place that she was very fond of. I now know why. My father used to take her to Dalesford quite often, and my Kelly family come from the Dalesford area. And my father's actually buried in the Eganstown Catholic Cemetery. So in her way, she was trying to tell me, but she couldn't, and I understand why.
Right. My question then is that when you found out that you are, I know it's a conversation, but the question is, when you found out that, well, you are the daughter of a priest. What went through your mind at that point?
It was absolute disbelief. It made sense to why my mother was secretive about it all and carried this burden. But yeah, I was, look, my whole world changed, my thinking of the Catholic Church. I just couldn't believe that this had been hidden away for all these years, and it was DNA that brought it to light. I was quite traumatized. Even now I still have days where I just think, I don't know how I can keep doing this. But, I got to a stage with it all that I had to make a decision. It was whether to keep going downwards in a downward spiral or do something constructive with this. And I decided to take the constructive side.
What do you mean by going down a spiral?
Mentally, it was so traumatic to me. Mm-hmm. And there were so many unanswered questions, and I'm one of those people that contact people, which I did. And, I had most of the Kelly family have been wonderful, but there was some of the Kelly family that rejected me. And I now know they knew that their cousin had a child. So it makes sense. But it's been a struggle.
So
I've spoken to many other children of priests, and so many of them are broken, and I find this quite disturbing that the Catholic Church don't acknowledge that we even exist. They prefer us to, my own treatment was, brush it under the table, say the right words and she'll go away. And I haven't, and that has become an issue with them.
Yeah, see, interestingly, like as Innocent was saying, my co-host Innocent was saying, he did not know about me in that sense, being the child of a priest. And I think when I listen to other children of priests speak, it makes me feel like I was privileged, in the sense that I was raised by my uncle and auntie, and they were as father and mother to me as any father and mother would be. And it was not until they passed away that I decided, okay, maybe now I can come out with the story and tell people exactly who I am, who my parents are, because I think I was in good hands, obviously, until they passed away. Now it's like, okay, now I have to face things by myself. I have to make decisions by myself. And I happen to carry the last name of my father's last name right from my certificates. They show my father's last name. So
You're lucky.
I carry my father's last name. I didn't have to change, but it changed somewhere in between when I think you adopted the name Kelly afterwards, right?
I decided that I needed to reclaim my identity, and it does not reflect on the wonderful man that raised me at all. He's my dad. Nothing or no one will take that away. He deserves that title. He was a wonderful person. But I still needed my identity. And I think being a genealogist for so many years, knowing where I came from was important. What I did with it, you don't even have to do anything with it, but just to know who you are was a weight lifted off my shoulders. And then when I went along with things, and I was terrified. I was like 4 or 5 months. The only people that knew were my husband and my 2 aunts. 3 aunts, sorry, that my father was a priest. I was so ashamed. I had in my head that people would just not talk to me anymore. They think I was crazy. But once I started to open up about it, it was actually part of that healing process. It doesn't take away, but it certainly helped for me anyway. And I think a lot of people just want to know their roots and their identity and know the truth. I don't think that's too much to ask. But when you have the Catholic Church dismiss and ignore the proof, that's traumatic in itself. In fact, I've found the trauma that the Catholic Church have put me through since I've made contact with them absolutely horrendous. I cannot believe that an organisation that's meant to be so caring and giving are so dogmatic about keeping their appearance looking good. And the more they do that to me, the more and more I go public.
See me too. That's the reason I go public, is because when I see people trying to keep secrets, then I realize, well, maybe I should, even if I I don't think that I had it bad. I still should speak for those that had it bad. Or
Exactly. I sort of realised that there was nothing in place, for this in general society. And I thought, I need to be a voice. People need to know if I can use my story to help others to step forward, and it has, at least be able to talk to people and get some of that weight lifted off their shoulders. It's amazing. And, it is part of that healing process. It never goes away, but I find it's helped me anyway. But I also now help people all around the world with their DNA, whether it be finding or confirming if their father's a priest, that's an important part of it, or just they want to know who they are and they don't have to be a priest or anything. The relief of just finding out who they are is immense. Their reactions are very similar to most people. I finally know who I am. I've been helping gentlemen over in Perth area who were victims that were sent out from Ireland by the Catholic Church to the orphanages there in Perth. And they're now they're men in their 80s or 70s and 80s trying to find out their fathers. And I've been helping some of them, and I've had them cry. They just wanted to know who they were before they died. That's not much to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
Innocent and I were talking about people. Innocent, did you have a question? I mean, we haven't drawn you into the story yet.
Yeah, her story is so captivating. I was just listening all the entire time. Yeah. Now, I was just wondering. I know you became a genealogist, which is interesting in itself. Was that a decision you made because of your search for your roots, or was just that a coincidence just kind of happened?
It just kind of happened. I used to love listening to my grandfather and all his stories, on my mother's side. And it was just, I now know that my father was very big on family history himself, and so was my mother. But it was just something I've always had an interest in. And I must say, I mean, there's been times I've looked at the family tree I had on my stepfather's side, and I just think, I just wonder where I am. Where do I fit in? Just be nice to know. But it came from, it's just a passion that I've always had. And I don't think it had anything to do with trying to find my father. Realistically, I couldn't do that without a name, But that didn't stop me from going to Melbourne and sitting in a coffee shop looking at people wondering if they're my siblings or they're my father and that. But I never stopped to look at a priest, did I? But that's okay. But
yeah. Innocent, have you don't know any other children of priests, Innocent?
No, I honestly...
What's your experience with the Catholic Church? Innocent and I were both raised Catholic, and we went through the whole process of baptism. And
we went through that entire process together. We went, in fact, in the same classes for
same classes.
First Holy Communion, second Holy Communion. You go to class, you learn about Jesus, you learn about the church. And then once you graduate, actually, that process involves some kind of graduation. You move on, and then later on in life, they expect you to. I think after the second Holy Communion, then you are approved to go in church and take the communion. And actually take it confidently, knowing you've gone through all the teachings. And he was in my class, and I never thought for one second that he would have been a child of a priest. Later on, maybe when I was 15, I started discovering that, I've seen priests who are relatives. I've seen them, so I've heard rumors, of some of those priests going, with others. They were just rumors. However, I didn't have the judgment. I don't think I judged that. I just thought it was odd. I thought, well, something like this and this happened with this priest and that lady, and people keep quiet about it, and they talk hush tones. And I was a kid, 15 years. I was like, oh well, it sounds kind of funny, but
I know what you mean. I mean, we used
Sounds
to
funny.
snigger at. It does. I used to snigger at people when you heard, not at people, when you heard stories about, that priest was on with that nun, or, he left the church and he had to, all that, and I'd snigger away, but you don't think about it and you don't talk about it. And I find the older generation in particular, and, that was just how they were brought up. There's no wrong or right with it, that it was all whispered about. I was whispered about. I know I was whispered about. And that's what the church want. They know that they have this power over people. Men in cloth, they were and treated like gods. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Oh yes,
and what they said went.
And nobody questioned it. Nobody questioned it.
No.
It's like you all go to church, it's all normal. And you hear rumors about, the priest that you're looking at. He's right there in front of you. He's preaching, and you heard rumors about him, philandering. But nothing is really, it was just kept quiet under the carpet, and everything was fine,
Yeah, and I think, like sexual abuse was like that as well, sadly, and it just took people to stand up to the church. And, and rightly so, the church need to be made accountable.
Yeah.
And that's what I want them to do, is to be accountable to me as well, because the trauma my mother went through is appalling, that she had to keep this secret, this burden.
Yes.
Because he was a damn priest.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Now, Emmanuel, I remember one time, this is maybe 2 or 3 years ago, or I think you were undergoing something, and you mentioned, that was on your Facebook.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about priests.
Yeah.
And it was a consistent thread. I think it was like every day.
Yeah.
Had something mentioned about priests.
Mentioning priests,
And you are saying, they should be arrested or whatever.
That's when I was angry.
Yes. And I didn't ask you about it.
Yeah.
Because I thought, when he's going through something, definitely. Maybe not the best time to ask about it.
Yeah.
But do you mind letting us know?
Illuminating you on that.
Yeah.
So and that's why I'm saying that when I listen to other children of priests, that's when I realized that I might have had it good, because at that time, as Innocent was saying, on my Facebook and other forums or similar forum, I was condemning my dad for not being there, basically, and I think that happens because I lost my adopted parents. So if I had kept my adopted parents, I would not have lashed out at my, biological father, but I was lashing out at him because he was not there. Because I lost my adopted dad at about the age of 14, 15, at a critical time. And I wanted, so I said, well, if I have a father who's a priest, he should have been there in the first place. And then something happened. He did not pay for my university education, and that's when I got really mad. And I said, well, if he had paid for my university education, I would not have been going through the challenges that I was going through in Canada and things like that. So I was very frustrated when I was writing those comments, Innocent. Is there anything I commented on that you remember, Innocent, apart from the fact that
you also
said they should be arrested?
No, you also commented about kids in particular. You said something about priests taking advantage of kids.
Yes.
And I think you use an angry tone.
Yeah.
You're like, they should be arrested. I don't know, Catholic Church is the devil, something of that sort.
Yes.
And Yeah, I was trying to pay. I was like, where is this anger coming from? I don't know where it's coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it did,
that's where it's coming from. Yeah.
yeah, Linda, it did affect him, later
I,
on in life.
yes, it can. I mean, I instantly was, I think in the first 24 hours in particular, if my father had been alive, I think I probably would have kicked his door in. I was so angry to think that the church and my father had kept this from me about the treatment of my mother. Everything made so much sense. And I was very, very angry. I learned that I had to work through that. I mean, you don't just get up one day, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I still have moments where you want to, but that's when I realised that what's the point of being angry? Let's do something about this. Let's support people. Let's help people. Be a voice. People who can't do it, be their voice. Help them to be a voice. So
Yeah.
that's where I turned the anger into something more constructive. And I'm glad I did, because I can see how broken some of the children are. They're a mess. And I understand why, because it's horrendous to find out such a secret's being kept from you. Some people knew all their lives, but it's very traumatic.
What we're doing now is helping with that process, Innocent.
Yeah, it's a
Convert-
healing process.
Converting that anger into something constructive, as Linda's saying,
Yeah.
which is really great. Yeah.
I like
So,
to call it, spiritually speaking.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
spiritualists, they like to call it, when you experience what you two experience,
Yeah.
say it's the dark night of the soul, which is like your soul undergoes a process of healing.
Yeah.
But that process of healing actually involves a lot of pain. And you have to go through that pain,
Yes.
to clear off the trauma, you know?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, some people unfortunately can't come out of that pain. And I see that so often. I see that with the mothers.
And
I see that with the children.
Yeah.
And I have even seen it with priests as well, ones that I have spoken to about this subject. So it affects everybody. And this is just it. The church have dismissed that.
They have.
They here in Australia, I got told by the church that I wasn't entitled to any counselling. Wait for this, because I wasn't a victim of sexual abuse. I said, how dare you? How dare you say that?
Yeah.
I hope you don't say that to everybody else. I said, I'm in this position because of the Catholic Church, just like those poor victims of sexual abuse. We don't need to be spoken to like that. And I took it on. I was not having it any other way. How dare they say that?
Yeah, that was insensitive.
Of course it was.
Yeah.
That was just crazy. What? I don't get it. The church don't recognise. They do now, the mothers, they are victims of sexual abuse, and rightly so. But the children, we're called secondary victims.
Yes.
And we're not recognised by the church. I'm talking about Australia.
Yeah.
We're not recognised by the church. In saying that, there is some good priests out there. I don't mean there isn't. But the church had this, different parishes have their own rules. There should be one thing for everybody. And I've seen the trauma personally of how victims are being treated by the church for sexual abuse and being a child of a priest or a nun or whatever the case may be. And it's deplorable, absolutely deplorable. They should hang their head in shame.
Like I know in some cases, I think the way I think about it is that some of these priests perhaps didn't really fit to be priests in the beginning. I say this because I know, not in Australia, but in South Sudan, for example, I've known so many people that went into the seminary precisely because they were offering free education. And that was the only way, because everybody's poor.
Yeah.
That was the only way you could get free education, was to go into church.
Yeah.
Get educated. Yeah. They would actually.
That makes sense.
Yes, the church would pay you up to PhD even,
Wow.
My dad made it all the way to his master's program in his
Yes, all free.
through the
And
church.
and you see, somebody somebody may not do it because they love God. They just want to do it. They want to go through that.
And I think sometimes they just conflicted. They don't know whether to leave the church or not. Like my dad, even though they stopped him about 20 years ago, he still lives in the church compound. He doesn't want to leave the church. He says that is where he built the church and he wants to stay there. Even though he's not a practicing priest for the last 20 years, he's still staying in the church compound because he says that is the church that he built. So I would say he really is a man of God, but I wish that the Catholic Church would allow them to get married. Don't you think so, Linda? I think I was telling you this earlier on.
Definitely. I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
It's not a normal practice by any means.
No.
So yeah, it's quite obvious that solves a lot of problems. And I think, and I think this stands out more because of that restriction that they have, and that includes sexual abuse as well. If a man and a woman could marry, you can still be a good person and do good things without being a priest or a nun or being held up by the church.
I mean,
I'm thinking about this and I'm like, it must be a lot harder for the nuns if they can meet the same type of crime and they get pregnant by a man out there. Then I don't think that the church would keep them. I don't know what happens, but
I have and do deal with people, including DNA wise, that their mothers are nuns. Probably half of the fathers are priests, and they've both stayed hidden into the system. I'm in touch with a woman who's still a retired nun, still in there, and she's got an adopted daughter who she speaks to, and everybody knows about her now, which is very brave for her, actually. But it goes both ways. But had people been able to marry, like my mother loved my father, and that's no disrespect to the man she married. He was a very, very good man, and that. But
well, religion creates this type of pretentious. I can't say pretentiousness, but it just creates this. What can I say? It makes people pretend to be something they're not.
They're not. Yeah, exactly.
And if the Catholic Church was a bit more open about these things, then we wouldn't have to worry, really. Yeah.
I've met up with some of my biological family. And I got a cousin. She came over to visit me only last week, and she said, we were such a small family. She said, I've missed so many years of having you as my cousin, and that's so unfair because I had to be hidden.
Had to be hidden, yes.
Oh, so you have to build those relationships.
Yeah.
And to meet, I'm sure you had to meet your uncles from the other side, from your father's side.
My father was actually an only child, but there is lots of cousins.
Yeah.
So that makes it a pretty interesting story just in itself when it comes to DNA.
What about a grandfather from your father?
They were long gone. Oh, my grandfather's siblings have all had children. But my grandparents only had the one child. My father's housekeeper is actually buried with them, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah.
He was very family orientated. And what I find sad is the fact that I've known all my life that I had a half brother and two half sisters. Mm-hmm. Where are they? I'll never know where they are unless someone does a DNA test.
Right.
Right. So that's why I like to help others find their families. I flew to Ireland last year to do a reunion with people all around Ireland.
So you become an expert in that area.
I wouldn't say an expert. Always lots to learn, but I do quite a lot of cases now. And like we're going to America, and I'm going to be staying with a girl that I found her 10 siblings for, and, we all met up in Ireland, and yeah.
Wow. Do you ever get the chance, Linda, to talk to the priests about this?
Yeah.
Yes, I do, actually. One of the gentlemen that I was put in contact with, he was one of my father's close friends. He was like 25 and my father was in his 50s when they met. But Pete was told about me. He was so shocked. He said, because I thought I knew your father well. He said, I never ever knew he had a child.
Wow.
But, listening to him, just his stories, he left the church after 20 odd years and eventually married, and he's got a wonderful wife, and they both have been so supportive. They understand, like from his side, he was able to fill me in on the priest side of things and how they were living and how naive they were kept and how they were controlled, basically. And he said, I don't want to be alone. He said, and that's where they all were going, into these nursing homes, all alone with no family. He said, and it took me, because he did all his training and everything, that I could still do what I want to do, like be kind and help people and support people, but I don't need a church and a gown to do that with. And he's never looked back, and he's been a wonderful source to me, and he supports anyone. He's met other children priests with me as well. So he's, and I've met other priests here that are still priests, retired priests, who have no time for the Catholic Church because of their restrictions. So, it goes all different angles, and there's lots of us out there and lots of different variations of the story. But, it's just the heads of the church that are really not very cooperative.
Do you follow do you follow the goings on in the church, the Pope and all that stuff? Do you follow that?
No, not really.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. I mean, I do. I mean, it's there.
Yes.
I have no time for man-made.
Yeah, because the current Pope compared to the previous popes, the current one seems to be more progressive, more.
So I believe.
It seems so.
Modern and that kind of thing. So.
Well, if it was very progressive, he would have sorted this problem out.
But he's not fixing the problem. And he's not like for example, here in Canada, we have a pretty serious issue with the past, with what the church did to the natives here. And I don't think that has been properly handled by the church. I think it's sort of just died.
Yeah,
the residential schools, right?
Yeah, there's a story about that. The residential schools.
They put these native children in residential schools and mistreated them.
They dug up.
And then some of them died and were buried in unmarked graves. They had to be dug up.
Yeah,
that happened. Yeah, it's happened in Ireland. It's
and so when the Pope
the church. This is what I find interesting. The church have got such a sad history, not sad, horrible history in most parts. They should be doing everything they can from the Pope downwards to rectify this, instead of me having to go to the media in the end to get a little letter to say, I acknowledge that Joseph Kelly is your father. They should be going, how can we help you? We are sorry this happened to you. We have this sort of support, that sort of support. We can offer you this. We are so sorry. But instead you're backwalled. No, because the more I push with this, the more it becomes known and people are talking about it. And they don't want that. They want us to stay underground. And I refuse to do that.
Yeah, I know.
I've got my mother in me, I think.
Want us to stay underground, yeah. And that's really sad, to make children stay underground, not know the full story is not good. How do you go ahead telling your story to the next generation?
But because of the stigma and that, I see this not just in myself, but in lots of people. I felt very, I felt very worthless. I wasn't good enough. I wouldn't be a good wife. I wouldn't be a good this. I wouldn't be a good that. And I let it affect me because I was illegitimate. And I know that sounds crazy, but you just feel worthless.
Yes.
Whereas once I found out who I was, irrespective that he's a priest, just gives you that weight off your shoulders. And it's no excuse for things of the past. I don't mean that, but I understand now why I felt like that or felt that I couldn't do that. You know, it does in all areas. I found this with a lot of other people. And when you find out that you're actually hidden and there's documents that are just horrendous to look at that my mother must have gone through, I just go,
and
you know.
I mean, not just priests. I mean, in our society, Innocent, you might recall that there are people who, you know, they wouldn't say exactly who else they have had children with. And so you have these half brothers and half sisters that you don't know about that might show up one day at your door and just say,
yes,
just like less than a year.
Here in Australia, I mean, I've spoken to various people and they know that there's a system that the Catholic Church used to dispose of their children to clergy, me being one of them in that system. So it's unspoken. Certainly the church would never confess to that, but I actually know that's correct. So, you know, the church are just covering up, and they think they give you just a little bit of what you want to know, that you'll go away. And that's how people are treated. And I find that it's not good enough, because deliberately taking children away and sending them off to be adopted is fine if there's a reason for that, but there was no reason. It was just because they're an unwed mother. And if you're pregnant to a priest or you're a nun pregnant to somebody else, that was a different ball game. And there is lots of evidence of stuff going on here in Australia.
Wow.
The church don't talk about it, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
And my paperwork and my own birth certificate, my mother's hospital records is a prime example.
Yeah.
Police involvement. She was 24. She had her mother with her. She should have been the informant, not the police station. Makes no sense. You know, so, you know, baby for adoption written everywhere. And then when it comes to the discharge, I'm discharged twice with no notes, and goes on and on. So, it's cover-ups. Yeah, cover-ups.
Yeah.
And I can't find my christening record. Never been found. So don't know where that is.
Yeah. I think your story is definitely similar to all those people that grow up not knowing their fathers.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
In your case, it's the shame. I can kind of I can empathize with. I can feel that shame that you would. Your shame is probably greater because for you, it's coming from the church. And and we as a society, we uphold the church and a high up there as a greater moral authority. And when we do that, and then we find out that they failed us in a big way, the shame is much greater. You know?
And I know from personal experience, that's what it's like. And this shouldn't be, this day and age, none of this should be happening. The church should be open and honest.
Yeah, it should be open and honest,
open and honest and try and help, you know. But
I was going to ask this. I don't know if I know you were raised Catholic, right?
She was not.
As such, I mean.
Sorry, I'm speaking for you. You should speak for yourself.
Oh, as such, okay. I thought that maybe if you're raised Catholic, were you tempted at one point? You know, when you go to the confession box and you find a priest there, did something go in your mind to say, hey?
Yeah. Confession to me was one of the most creepiest pastimes you could ever find. That's my opinion of it. Locked in a little room with an old man. No.
It is creepy. Yeah.
And when you're 8 and 9, trying to find out what you did wrong to confess. I can still remember going to confession the first time. It was the most bizarre experience of my life. And I'm sitting there thinking, I pinched my sister's doll. I mean, I couldn't think of anything when I was a kid. I just found it one of the bizarre moments of my life. But anyway, Obviously, you can see I'm not a practicing Catholic, and it's look. My grandmother was a Catholic, had rosary beads. I've got a beautiful Bible and everything, but my mother played the game while my grandmother was alive, and when I made my first Holy Communion, all my sisters got baptised on the same day. So, I was, 8 or 9 or something, and they still hadn't been baptised. But sadly, when my grandmother passed, that all changed. I never made my confirmation. My mother kept me home from school. Wow. I now get it. Yeah, all of that stopped. This pretending to be Catholic, all that stopped. Not that it mattered. And I just do remember saying to Mum, because my stepdad put my sisters and I in the Catholic school only because Mum didn't drive and we could walk to school. And he thought he was doing Mum a favour. Yeah. And I remember Mum years later saying, I never wanted you to go to a Catholic school. But that was your dad's idea. She said, I never wanted you. And I thought it was, what? Now I get it. It makes, why she was carrying from the priests. Why she would be alone at the Catholic Church, but only be at family events. But I always remember when I said to her, everyone else goes to church on Sundays. Why don't we? And I remember saying, look, she said, you can go if you want to. I'm not going to stop you. She said, but you don't need to go to church to be a good person. And I've never forgotten it. And she's right.
Yes.
She's right.
Yes.
But, this children of priests and this is not about a person's faith. It's actually about an organisation. Everyone has their faith and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't need to be dominated. I'm doing DNA and finding priests in the family that are playing God to other families.
Yes.
And, I have them in line as being granddaddy and father of the year, and they're practicing and telling people how to live their married life.
Yes.
They're not experts. No. How dare they?
They can't be experts.
Yeah, they cannot be experts.
They themselves are not married. They can't.
They
are just can't advise somebody from that position.
Exactly. So. And
they the worst is they actually, some of them are the counselors. They counsel couples.
I know.
How do you counsel couple? How do you do that?
Couples,
I know. I never got it. My father was a mentor to many families when he was alive. He was even, I shouldn't laugh, but sadly he was supporting in the home for unwed mothers in Melbourne, in Carlton. And he was, my aunts and that, and other people have told me, my father used to tell people that, they weren't good enough to be a mother, and that the child would go to a good Catholic family, good Catholic rich family. You know what? 18 months later, my father was sending my own mother off to Sydney for the same thing. Wow. And that doesn't sit well with me at all. It's very hypocritical. Not only my father, but just in general. That was what the things that were being said to women. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
innocent.
Yeah, and I have my own trauma, but I think the mothers have even a bigger trauma. And I think it's extremely unfair and unnecessary.
Yeah.
And not needed.
It is not needed. It's not needed. Yeah. I was trying to bring Innocent back into the conversation and wondering if he's actually if he is a practicing Catholic. Innocent, you're not a practicing Catholic, are you?
I started off as a practicing Catholic, and then as soon as I left high school, I was already starting to question religion in high school.
Yeah,
but I didn't quite. I went to a religious school.
Yeah.
I didn't quite put two and two together until I came to university, because, in university, you have, all this freedom. I found all this freedom.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and all freedom of thought.
Freedom of thought, yeah.
Because I don't think we had proper freedom of thought in high school.
No.
You could question some things, but it was within certain boundaries. And then all of a sudden, I'm here in university, and I'm meeting all these professors and everybody around the world. Asia or Nigeria, everywhere. They're all in one place, and all of a sudden, I'm questioning things, and I'm in debates with many different people of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'm not going to church anymore. It's not because I hated going to church, but just because I had philosophical differences that were not reconcilable, could not be reconciled by any argument that I had concocted or somebody had made for the church. It didn't make any sense to me. So I stopped going. However, there was a time I was agnostic. I was maybe second year of college. I was a bit agnostic.
Yeah.
But then came back to a belief in God. Yeah. But it was more, I felt it was more of a spiritual belief that was in line with myself.
Right.
I thought
not some religious dogma.
Yeah, no religion anymore. There was nobody. I needed to go to a building,
confess
to pray to God or confess my sins. I didn't even think I had sins anymore. It was like, I have no sins.
Yeah.
What do you say I have? Why are you saying I have sins? What do you mean by that specifically?
Yeah.
So to me, all of that was just gone. And I just became this person who was like, well, I can pray any way I want to pray.
Yeah.
I can think about anything, meet anybody I want to meet.
Yeah.
And the only thing that matters is I love myself and love others. That's how my mom doesn't like it too much because she's a staunch Catholic.
She's still a staunch Catholic. Yeah.
However, she's a staunch Catholic, but she's also educated. Yeah. And she respects that the freedom of thought.
Yeah.
So she's like,
I know
go to church sometimes.
She say go to church sometimes. Yeah. My mom also died as a staunch Catholic. She's still going to church even after all that stuff.
Yeah, but in my mom's era, church was kind of mandatory. It was mandatory. It was you had to go to church no matter what. And also, she went to a Catholic school. Mm-hmm. It was like the most educated people you could find around you were Catholics.
Right.
And by the way, in most, we all come from Africa.
Yeah.
Before colonization happened, the missionaries went to Africa and built schools, hospitals, and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And most of them were Catholics.
Yeah.
And they build really good schools. And up to today, many of those schools are, tops leading schools,
Leading schools, yeah.
And I think that's the allure of the church. Seeking knowledge, seeking the light, seeking that knowledge. That is what, made some people join the priesthood as well.
Yes.
Because that's a great way.
I'm obviously of very Irish descent, and it was very prestigious to have a nun or a priest in your family.
Sure.
And it was, families just protected those people, and like I speak to any of my family members, and they just worshipped him. He was a nice man. He was not a horrible man by any means, but I just think that even though I came along after his parents had died, he shouldn't have been a priest. But then you can't leave that prestigious. I don't know. I think they have him up on a pedestal, and I think that's hard for them to sort of step away from. But people say to me, "Oh, later in life, your father was very, very sad. he found it very difficult and very lonely. And I said, well, in 1961 and 62, I said he had a chance to be very happy. I said, and he chose not to.
That's a good one.
You know, he had a chance. His parents were gone. He was an only child, and he chose not to.
He chose not to. He was an only child.
Yep.
He could have.
So, it was that prestigious placement in society.
That placement in society, yeah.
And even, not that I had to think much of it or deal with it much, but, you said, oh, priest,
I think that's similar to Emmanuel, your father too, as you mentioned. He would rather be in that environment, right? And choose to live a life of happiness,
Yes. Makes it difficult because if I was his only child, and I believe I'm not, it makes a huge difference when I think, it might have been that wonderful love story.
Yes.
But I think
okay.
It was.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not his only child. And there's whispers. There's always whispers. Yeah. And many families have those whispers about the priest or the nun.
Yeah.
In hindsight, sometimes it's probably worth following some of those things up because I'm now announcing to people, saying, well, look, he is your father. And I've said to people, look, he isn't your father. And they're actually quite relieved. And then I'll say, well, would you like me to find out who he is? And that's then given them their identity back, not being a priest or whatever, So I still, even in today's generation, I see people go, that's a relief, he's not my father. And I think, why? But then I think I know why, because it's that stigma, that shame, that I can't talk about it. And I remember when I found out myself, I just went, I now have to keep the secret. I was curled up on my couch with my husband consoling me. I said, I have to keep the secret now. And I've never forgotten that feeling. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Eventually, obviously, I didn't keep the secret, and it was the best thing I ever did.
I don't think
load off your shoulders.
That's a load off your shoulders. Really,
I just wish my mother was alive to see this, because it would have taken the weight off her shoulders as well.
Oh yeah, it would have done that. Yeah, I think so. Because I think that's what my mom also wanted. It's just some kind of acknowledgement from the church, from my dad. Get that acknowledgement.
Yeah, no, my mother carried the shame. Nobody knew what went on between her and I, except her and I, and it was horrendous. I know. I'll never forgive them for doing that to my mother. She had to lose her family, not lose her family, but move away from her family, and that was so hard for her. She was so isolated. But her life changed terribly because of. She had a child to a priest. Had it been the local plumber, I would have been told that, your dad's John Smith, and yes, you can meet him, and life would have gone on. We've had him in my life as as well as the man who raised me. Most families it works like that, but absolute total secrecy on who my father was. Yeah.
Right. So you feel like you missed something. You missed something, right?
Of course, I did. I had the right to know my extended family. I had the right to know who my father was. My mum helped many girls else, that were pregnant out of wedlock. So she did the right thing, but that's why I found it hard she wouldn't tell me his name. But I understand why. And people think, aren't you angry? And I thought, no, I'm not angry. There was a reason, and a very good reason. She was frightened. She was a frightened woman. And, I get it all now. And I know she desperately wanted me to know who he was, but she just couldn't.
And who knows? Who knows what he would have been telling her,
Exactly. She was very fearful. It wasn't, Mum, who's my father? I don't know. It was absolute fear would come across her face, and you just like, what the hell happened? And I couldn't understand her fear. I get it now.
Get it now.
I think bits and pieces that I have been told make sense. But she was obviously quite traumatised by what happened to her.
Right.
So, and I hold the church responsible.
Yeah. They are responsible. They should
Of course
be,
they are.
yeah. They should be the ones that are taking the lead in, opening up and.
Of course. And that includes the Pope. I'm sorry, but,
Yeah, that
he's
includes
got the
Pope,
powers to change things immediately,
to
put
change
things in
immediately.
place.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe by connecting children of priests and nuns and all the Catholic clergy, maybe by connecting their children, maybe it'll make a stronger voice and stronger case for the Pope to make changes, or for the Church to make changes.
Well, the Pope is
Well,
not
The
interested.
way we're talking right now.
yeah, look, I honestly, the church they go on a one by one case and get people to sign it off, and they can't do anything about it. And that's what they did with the mothers. But they won't be doing that with me.
Because as Innocent was trying to say, that there are some good things that they have done in our society that we have seen.
Of course.
And if they want us to maintain that opinion, then they have to sort of correct certain things.
Yes, exactly.
Such as what we're talking about. Then we can maintain that positive opinion.
By the way, in your group,
despite the mistakes they've made, yeah.
In your group, do you have priests that have joined the group?
We don't have priests. Do we have interactions with priests, Linda?
On the various groups I've seen,
I've not seen any.
That doesn't mean that I don't know priests that have had children.
Because it would be.
I wish they would come. Out and interact with us.
They're actually very similar to the mother and the child. Like, they don't want the secret out either. And they're traumatized by, not all of them, but some, just want to be able to have their child in their life. Some pretend. Like you'll find in a lot of the situations, their local parish priest is actually their father, and they baptised them, they gave them confirmation, everything, in community, and the whole lot. They were part of their life, and they're actually being their biological father, and that's quite common, I'm finding. Or the child belongs to the housekeeper of a priest. That's the other scenario. And then there's the poor girls that are just shunted away because it was their fault that the priest got them pregnant. And that's how the church look at it, I think, but that's okay. It's not okay, but I just want them to know that that's not the right way to deal with things.
Yeah. Apart from, is there some kind of a support system for church priests?
No. Not here in Australia.
I wish there was, yeah.
And there's nothing in place that I'm aware of anywhere in the world. We've got our little groups of people that all talk at different various times, but that's a support for each other. But no, there isn't. And churches that I've dealt with various situations, each church parish is different, and they're their own identity. So, I can tell you that two children of priests that I'm aware of here in Australia have had different outcomes with their local priest or whoever they had to deal with. Mine hasn't, and then others that have. So it should be all, like I said before, it should be all unified, and it's not. And that makes it very difficult. There should be policies and procedures is what needs to be put in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah,
definitely.
There should be some kind of even a whistleblower program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have any qualms of telling the church.
Yeah, like for example, if your mother had the chance to be the whistleblower, I think a way to report that, to some.
I think back when she was younger, when all this happened, it was such a stigma that she probably wouldn't. But I think once she got over realised that this was a common occurrence and a common procedure by the Catholic Church to treat the women like this, she actually would have been unified with the other mothers, for example. Yeah. And, of course, my mother supported me endlessly. I wasn't treated differently, but there was just that something that she made me aware of, but not aware of. Can't explain it, but it was a bond. So I think if she had her time over, she'd be standing right here beside me, supporting me and her right through. My aunts, her sisters, have supported me with the Catholic Church. They have gone to meetings with me. They've been a great source of support. So, yeah.
That's good.
You know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And my husband, he's amazing.
And your husband, of course.
I mean,
yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And my immediate family, most of them being terrific. But, my husband says, if you need to do that, you do it. I support you 100%.
That's great.
So,
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, my mother would have been beside me by now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's wonderful that we are forming these groups through social.
That's a part of healing.
Through social media. We're getting together and we're solving this, trying to solve this problem one step, right? By making our voices heard.
Yes. And I found that once I went public, believe it or not, it was the best thing I ever did. The weight that comes off your shoulders, just being able to be yourself, acknowledge your identity. I am a Kelly and I am proud to be a Kelly. I just wish I'd had them in my life earlier.
That's right.
Yeah.
That right there is a great inspiration. Your entire story is quite inspiring. And
thank you.
Whoever's watching, I hope they find that courage, because you had to have a lot of courage to stand out like that and face the world and say the truth within yourself. Yeah,
and I do a lot of it in my mother's memory because I know she couldn't do it. So, I speak up on mothers and children. It's something I just couldn't believe in this day and age that is still so taboo and that so many people are so broken from it. I understand why, but I just can't. I can't believe that the church can't acknowledge us the right way. They should be doing this the right way. How can we help you? And we are sorry. I mean, I've got in writing that if my parents' relationship was of sexual nature, what an insult. What an absolute insult to my mother.
I know that one was, yeah.
And to me, that's dismissing my whole identity.
Oh, yeah.
That's disgusting.
It is, yeah.
But anyway, that's how I'm being treated.
That's not fair, yeah.
No, it's not. It was a simple request. I didn't go in and ask for money. I don't want money. I want acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd get that. But
so to our listeners, this is the Roaming Roots podcast. We might change that name, but we're calling it the Roaming Roots podcast for now. And it has to do with our roots. Again, when we're coming up with the name, it shows us, that we have roots in one place, but then the roots spread out. We are rooted in one place, but we spread out, going to new places and meeting new people, new experiences, and so on. So now, you have your roots. When you trace your roots go back to you don't have to choose between your those that raised you and your actual biological father. I guess those are part of your roots, right? All in all,
they are part of you. They're part of your identity. It is a fear of rejection. Once you know and you try to make contact, you can be rejected again. I've seen it happen, but that's okay. It's not okay, but you still know who you are. I am a Kelly, and nothing will change that.
Yeah.
I was proud and still am proud of my maiden name, which was Dixon, by the man who raised me. I'm proud to be his daughter. But I also love the identity of who I thought my father might be. It wasn't what I thought it would be, but as a kid growing up, that's what I had in my head. And that's what I had put on his headstone. always loved but unknown.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Amazing.
And it's, as you get older, that context of what you thought was love and the idea of it obviously changes. But, I would love to have had him in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of the lucky ones. I was raised by a good man and a wonderful mother, of course. But, yeah.
And I think I was that lucky as well. So the luck.
Some of them aren't.
Yeah, some people are not that lucky.
No. And, doing the DNA that I do now to help people find their identity, it's certainly a field. You could just do a separate documentary on just the stories that I could have in that. My God. But anyway, and so it goes on. Yeah. But it's rewarding.
Yes, rewarding. Well, we're happy that you're able to speak about these things to us. We appreciate it very much. And I'm sure our listeners will also appreciate it very much. And to our listeners, leave your comments about what what you think about our stories as we share them. Leave your comments and tell us what your own experiences are in terms of being raised perhaps by different parents and that kind of thing. Innocent?
Yeah, Linda, it's been quite a pleasure. Even as we wrap this up, it's been a great pleasure to actually meet you and listen to your story. And all the entire time, I'm just inspired by that courage. That's not easy to get, and it's not easy to simply sit and express yourself in that manner the way you did. And I know for sure your story will influence some other people to even come forward. And
I hope so.
Yeah.
And if they're not sure who their father is, please, I'll help them out.
Yeah.
Not a problem at all.
And how can they contact you, Linda?
Through my website, lindakelly-lawless.com.
Yeah, that's
Yep, contact me that way.
Yeah, Linda Kelly-Lawless.com.